I hope you will assure your constituents that what we are concerned about here is violence and threats of violence.
You've defended yourself repeatedly today before this committee by saying, well, you're focused on violence. But now, of course, we've seen the memo from your own Justice Department advising state and local and other prosecutors about all of the different federal causes of action that they can bring against parents that are not about violence.
So now I've shown you Chino Valley School District in California. I've shown you Temecula and Sunol Glen districts in California. But here's a piece that I wanted to do in the same light, coming off of the last video that I did with respect to Sunol Glen School District. The president of the board there, it's Ryan Jurgensen, has been receiving death threats. Okay, death threats. Now, you may remember, all right, the domestic terrorist situation where a gentleman, Scott Smith, in Loudoun County, whose daughter was actually raped in a bathroom because of these bathroom policies by a man in a skirt in the women's restroom, and was at the school board meeting fighting about it and arguing about it. You can only imagine how passionate he would be in arguing his case. This man was arrested and listed as one of the names as a potential domestic terrorist to the FBI. And this is not conjecture. This was on actual memos. There was originally a memo sent by the National School Board Association, which then went to the FBI, which then prompted a memo from Attorney General Garland on this very matter, instructing the FBI and other agencies to look into the matter as if these parents were potentially domestic terrorists. This over a man who was angry that his daughter was raped. It was covered up by the school, and he was told it never happened. And then on top of that, they arrest him and charge him. Of course, the charges were all blown, and the Governor Lavkin, I believe his name is, went ahead and pardoned him of any future litigation based on this case. But the courts absolutely found that his daughter was indeed raped in this room. As a matter of fact, not only did the school hide it, but they sent the kid to another school where he then sexually assaulted another woman in the women's bathroom. Now, this man, and among others, was labeled a domestic terrorist. However, now there's a real threat, and it's being ignored. Now, here's Ryan Jurgensen, the president of the school board in Sunol Glen District.
I did not expect this amount of vitriol from people.
For weeks, Ryan Jurgensen, the Sunol Glen Unified School District president, says he and his family have repeatedly been threatened.
I can take people disagreeing, but it's beyond the pale to start harassing children in an elementary school. It is uncalled for to harass my wife. That won't stand.
It follows a controversial school board decision that he stands behind to only fly the United States and California flags on campus.
The U.S. flag is the most inclusive flag that there is in the world. It stands for freedom. It stands for liberty. It stands for one nation, together, indivisible. And there is not one student in our school that is not represented by that flag.
The change in policy brought about backlash and protests, even claims of a direct attack on LGBTQ+ students and teachers. Jurgensen says that's not true and wasn't the goal.
Ultimately, we need to get down to teaching our children, educating our children in math, reading, writing, and focus on that, and not focus on any other distractions.
And not focus on any other distractions, which at this school, by the way, it absolutely was a distraction. Okay, so, but it wasn't taken down just for that reason. All right, these are parents who have come in and elected people into those seats, which is how you do it. Okay, they elected people into those seats who represent their values. And no matter how many bust-in protesters and paid hacks they try and throw in to act like there's a big backlash, the reality remains the same. These Marxists don't exist in numbers. They just don't. Now, they can make it look like numbers in a small town like that where there's only 300 kids in one school in the district, but in Temecula and other larger cities, they're meaningless. And then the fact of the matter is, you'll know who's on what side by who sits in that school board. And parents were not sleeping on the fact that on who they put into those school boards, not in Chino, not in Temecula, and not in Sunol. And the fact of the matter is, they're legit. And the idea that they can recall these people is just ridiculous. There's no hope. There's no hope for that, because only they believe they have numbers. You may remember, and this is kind of the point here, you may remember that Scott Smith story, or the whole idea basically of the National School Board putting up that letter trying to accuse parents of being domestic terrorists for fighting back. All right, all across the nation. Now, the result of that school board letter, that National School Board letter, was 26 states pulling membership from the school board. They then retracted, realized that it was a disaster. All right, this is not a situation of numbers versus numbers. This is everyone versus a handful. Period. That's what this is. I want to give you Garland's comments. Now, Cruz took it to him. There were a few that took it to him, Jim Jordan and others. But I thought the Cruz one was probably the best one to make the example. So here's what he's saying. And then I'm going to get into the actual threats that were made to Ryan Jurgensen, the president of the Sunul District.
I hope you will assure your constituents that what we are concerned about here is violence and threats of violence.
You've defended yourself repeatedly today before this committee by saying, well, you're focused on violence. But now, of course, we've seen the memo from your own Justice Department advising state and local and other prosecutors about all of the different federal causes of action that they can bring against parents that are not about violence, they're about harassment and intimidation. I'm looking here at this memo. It identifies no fewer than 13 possible federal crimes involving harassment and intimidation, including making annoying phone calls.
Do you understand why a parent would be upset when your daughter is raped at school, the school board covers it up, and then lies to you and claims there have been no assaults, we have no instances of assaults in our bathroom, and that was a flat-out lie, as the court concluded this week. This letter calls him a domestic terrorist. You based a direction to the FBI, an official direction from the Attorney General, on this letter, and I'll tell you what, the NSBA is so embarrassed of this letter, they've apologized for it and retracted it, but you don't apparently have the same willingness to apologize and retract what you did.
They apologized for it, and then 26 states left because of that letter. But Garland refused to apologize for it. Refused to. You watched how that man was grabbed and manhandled by police, all for standing up and speaking about his disgust at the fact that they were covering up a rape of his daughter. This man's name was on the potential domestic terrorist list that Garland sent to the FBI. Now, I want you to wrap your head around that, okay? Because while they're willing to arrest this man and label him as a domestic terrorist, listen to the threats, the actual threats. Now, when you listen to Garland speak in multiple situations across the board while he was being interrogated, he detailed this was all about specifically threats of violence. Now, nothing has happened to protect Ryan Jurgensen, but here's what actually he's dealing with.
And the Supreme Court has made quite clear that the word intimidation with respect to the constitutional protection is one that directs a threat to a person with the intent of placing the victim in fear of bodily harm or death.
Online threats and harassing emails have ensued, one claiming oppression was Jurgensen's goal, saying you may need to hide your kids and anything you love. Another reading, enjoy your weekend, it could be your last. Even social posts suggesting Jurgensen is part of a hate group.
That is unacceptable, and I will not stand for that. And I will not roll over to these bullies, these deranged individuals who are inciting anger and violence.
Documents show Jurgensen has already filed a restraining order against at least one community member. He says with lies being publicly spread, he's taking safety precautions.
You never know in this world that we're in these days. People do crazy things.
4 of his children attend Sunol Glen. A 5th starts next year. He says some of the hate has also been directed at them. His father says he has no agenda other than to do what's best for the school.
Schools should be safe and inclusive for all people, for my kids, for everyone's kids, without exception.
And there's the breakdown, right? They're threatening his children. Okay, they're threatening his family. They're threatening his home. They're like clearly, directly threatening. But yet our DOJ considers, so just so you know whose team, it's disgusting that there are even teams here, but just so you know what side the DOJ is on, I think that's pretty clear. The DOJ, what was the DOJ's comment about this? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Crickets. That's what you got from the DOJ on this. But they're going to label a man whose daughter was raped and the school covered it up and was angry about it at a school board meeting, committed no violence, threatened no violence, was just angry about it, speaking loudly, was labeled a domestic terrorist. This is the world we live in, folks. But the fact of the matter is, we're winning. And that's the moral of the story, is we're winning. Parents are finally opening their eyes to what's going on, and they're cutting out the whole, that's a one-off, that doesn't really happen, that's not real. They're stopping that now. They're coming after these folks. And to the Marxists who are not the ones, the do-do-dos that are in these schools and just regurgitating the garbage that's been getting preached for generations. No, I mean the Marxists above that. I mean the ones who actually were behind miseducating all of these educators, etc. People who don't know civics, who don't know anything. The people behind that, you're losing. Take the message loud and clear. As a matter of fact, you've lost, because now it's just a matter of time. Now it is just a matter of time. Parents, the numbers are not in your favor. The illusion that there's so many people that agree with you is fading, and people are now beginning to understand the mind screw that's been going on since the 60s and how it has evolved to the point that we're at now. Our children do not belong to the state. Our children belong to the parents. Teachers, I don't give a damn how you feel about it. The reality of the matter is, if you're a good teacher, God bless you. If you're not, if you're one of these teachers who thinks that they're your children, if you're one of those, you're about to get re-educated, because they're not. They belong to the parents. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. I'm out.
And like that,